The scent of her perfume hit me first. Not the light, floral one she wore for me, but the heavy, cloying, expensive one she'd started buying a few months back. For my confidence, she'd said, dabbing it on her wrists with a secretive little smile. I stood in the dim hallway of our own home, a house I'd sweat and bled to pay for, feeling like a stranger, an intruder. The second thing that hit me was the sound of a man's laughter. Not the boisterous, familiar laugh of a friend or a relative. This was a low, confident, unfamiliar rumble, and it was coming from my living room. My feet moved on their own, silent on the plush runner, drawn by the gravitational pull of a truth I already knew in my gut. The door to the living room was slightly ajar. I didn't push it. He just looked. And there she was, my wife, Carol, the woman I'd built my life around for 15 years. She was curled on the cream-colored Italian leather sofa I'd spent 2 bonus checks on, her legs tucked under her. But she wasn't curled up with a book, waiting for me. She was curled into him, some guy in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. His arm was around her, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. Her head was on his chest, and she was looking up at him with a look of pure, unadulterated adoration. A look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. A bottle of my best Scotch the Macallan 25 I was saving for our 20th anniversary was on the coffee table, 2 half-empty glasses beside it. They were using my favorite crystal tumblers. I felt the world tilt. The air left my lungs in a silent, painful rush. It was a physical blow, a sucker punch to the soul. This wasn't a suspicion anymore, a paranoid fantasy born from late nights working and her increasingly distant coolness. This was real. This was concrete. I was catching my wife Carol red-handed in the home we shared, defiling every memory we'd ever made in it. I must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, the scuff of a shoe on hardwood. Carol's head snapped up. Her eyes, a pretty hazel I once thought held the whole universe, met mine. The adoration in them vanished, replaced by a flash of pure animal panic. She jerked upright, pushing away from the man as if he'd suddenly caught fire. "Mark!" she gasped, her hand flying to her throat. You're home early." The man, to his credit, looked startled but recovered quickly. He didn't jump away guiltily. He just slowly, arrogantly, unfolded himself from my couch and stood up, straightening his suit jacket. He had the polished, smug look of a luxury car salesman. "Early?" I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, like the eerie quiet before a tornado. "My flight was on time, Carol. It's you who's running late." The man extended a hand, a bold move. "Mark, I've heard so much about you. I'm Stephen Thorne." I ignored his hand. I kept my eyes locked on my wife. "Thorne? As in Thorne Capital, the venture firm?" Stephen gave a slight condescending nod, dropping his unshaken hand. "That's right." It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. The new perfume, the sudden interest in high finance, the complaints about my lack of ambition despite my 6-figure salary as a project manager, the whispered phone calls she'd quickly end when I entered the room. She wasn't just having an affair, she was trading up. She'd found a newer, shinier model with a bigger bank account. "Get out," I said to Stephen, my voice low and deadly. "Now, see here," he began, his tone dripping with condescension. "You don't hear me in my own house," I snarled, taking a step forward. The calm was evaporating, replaced by a red-hot rage. "You get your sorry ass out of my home before I do something the courts will really frown upon. That's my scotch, that's my wife, and that's my patience you've just exhausted." Carol found her voice, a shrill, nervous thing. "Mark, stop it! You're being a Neanderthal. Stephen and I were just discussing a business opportunity." "Did the business opportunity require his hand on your ass, Carol?" I asked, my voice dripping with a sarcasm so venomous it surprised even me. Because, from where I'm standing, it looked like a hostile takeover. Stephen finally seemed to grasp that his money and slickness weren't going to intimidate me in this particular arena. He picked up his briefcase. "Carol, I'll call you," he said smoothly, as if he were just concluding a meeting. "You won't," I said, my gaze never leaving Carol's pale, frightened face. "She'll be changing her number." He left, a cloud of expensive cologne and arrogance in his wake. The click of the front door closing was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Carol was already morphing from caught adulteress to wounded victim. She drew herself up, her chin trembling with manufactured indignation. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" she started, tears welling in her eyes. "Masterful. You're never here. You're always working or too tired to pay attention to me. What did you expect me to do? Wither away? Stephen listens to me. He appreciates me. He can give me the life I deserve." And there it was, the heart of it, the greed. It wasn't about loneliness or a lack of connection. It was about what she deserved. The life I'd given her, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a good suburb, 2 luxury cars, vacations in Hawaii, wasn't enough anymore. She deserved more. I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "The life you deserve? You mean the life I provided? The one you're apparently so eager to walk away from for a bigger portfolio?" "It's over, Mark," she said, her voice cold now, the tears gone as quickly as they came. The mask was off. "I want a divorce. Stephen's lawyer is already drawing up the papers. I'm going to take you for everything you have. This house, the cars, your retirement, everything. You humiliated me tonight, but I'll win in the end. You'll see." She swept past me, heading for the master bedroom, presumably to pack a bag and go to her lover. I didn't try to stop her. I just stood there in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, the acrid smell of her betrayal, and his cologne hanging in the air. The numbness lasted through the night. I didn't sleep. I sat in my home office, in the dark, staring at the blank screen of my computer. The pain was a living thing, a beast gnawing at my insides. But as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the pain began to crystallize into something else, a cold, hard, unwavering resolve. She thought she held all the cards. She had the rich boyfriend. She had the lawyer. She thought I was just a tired, average guy she could steamroll on her way to a richer life. She thought she could take everything from me, but she'd forgotten who I was. She'd forgotten that before I was her provider, I was a fighter. I'd fought my way out of a nothing town with a scholarship and 2 jobs. I'd fought my way up the corporate ladder through sheer grit. Mark Jensen didn't roll over and die. And he sure as hell didn't get played for a fool. Revenge. It's an ugly word, but in that moment it was the only word that felt right. It wasn't just about anger anymore. It was about justice. It was about making sure the greedy didn't prosper. It was about ensuring that Carol and her silver-spooned boyfriend learned a very expensive lesson. But I wasn't going to do anything stupid. No violence, no threats. That was for amateurs. I was going to beat them at their own game. I was going to be smarter, quieter, and infinitely more patient. The first thing I did, once the banks opened, was hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I found the meanest, most ruthless divorce attorney in the state. A woman named Rhonda Vance, whose nickname was the Vacuum because she left opposing parties with nothing. I walked into her office, laid out the situation, and saw a predatory smile spread across her face. "Adultery is one thing," she said, her voice like gravel. "Adultery with a high-net-worth individual who is undoubtedly advising her on asset concealment? That's Christmas, Mr. Jensen. We're going to have so much fun." My next stop was a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Frank who came highly recommended by Rhonda. "I need everything," I told him, sliding a retainer across his desk. "Every text, every email, every financial record she's trying to hide. I want to know what they're planning before they even know it themselves." Frank just nodded. "Consider it done." Then, I went home and began the performance of a lifetime. When Carol returned the next day, haughty and armed with her lawyer's contact information, I was ready. I played the heartbroken, defeated husband. I let my shoulders slump. I let my voice crack. "Carol, after last night, I sighed, running a hand through my hair, looking every bit the broken man. You're right. I haven't been there for you. Maybe we can talk about this before the lawyers get involved and bleed us both dry, for old time's sake." She looked at me with pure contempt, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. A drawn-out legal battle would be expensive, even for Stephen. A quick, uncontested divorce where I just rolled over would be cheaper and faster. "What is there to talk about, Mark?" she said, but her tone was less hostile. "I just need some time," I pleaded. "This is a lot to process. Can we just have a cooling-off period? A month? No lawyers, just us trying to be civil. Then we can talk about dividing things up, fairly." I saw the greed override her caution, She saw an easy win. She agreed to a 1-month hiatus before filing any official papers. It was all the time I needed. The reports from Frank started coming in. They were a special kind of hell to read, a detailed ledger of my own betrayal. Photos of them at fancy restaurants, holding hands. Them shopping for jewelry on Rodeo Drive. My credit card statements showed she'd told me that 15-0 charge was for a new water heater, but the real gold mine was digital. Frank, a wizard with technology, had somehow gained access to their email chain. Their messages were nauseating. They were planning everything. "Stephen, my lawyer says if we can prove he was emotionally absent, we can go for spousal support on top of the asset split. Start a diary. Document every fight, every time he worked late." Carol, "Don't worry, darling. I've been doing that for months. He's so clueless. He has no idea what's coming. I can't wait to be rid of him and finally start our life together. The Hamptons' house is going to be perfect." They discussed me like a troublesome business partner that needed to be bought out cheaply. They talked about hiding assets. Stephen advised her to start making large cash withdrawals from our joint accounts to stash away. For her personal safety, of course, she'd withdraw 9-0 at a time, just under the mandatory reporting limit. But the most damning email, the one that made my blood run cold and then boil, was from Stephen to his own lawyer, which Frank had also intercepted. "Stephen, Carol's husband is a pushover. He's agreed to a cooling-off period. Use the time to draft the papers. We'll go for the jugular. The house, half his 401k, spousal support for at least 10 years, and the investment portfolio. He built that portfolio with her as his wife, so it's marital property. Once we drain him, he'll be starting from 0 at 50. He'll never recover." I read that last line over and over. He'll never recover. They didn't just want to leave me. They wanted to ruin me. They wanted to erase the last 20 years of my life and leave me destitute. That was the moment any last shred of love or pity I had for Carol died. It was replaced by a glacial coldness. "Okay," I thought. "You want to play for keeps? Let's play." Rhonda Vance was delighted with the evidence. "This is beautiful," she crooned, reading the emails. "This is premeditated fraud. But we need more. We need to know about his assets. This isn't just about defending you, Mark. This is about going on the offensive." An idea began to form in my mind, a cruel and perfect idea. Carol's greed was her greatest weakness. She couldn't resist a shiny thing, and Stephen's arrogance was his. He thought he was the smartest guy in every room. I gave Frank a new assignment. "I need you to find me something. A project Stephen Thorne is working on. Something big, secret, and vulnerable." A week later, Frank delivered. Thorne Capital was in the final stages of securing a massive deal to build a new eco-resort in Costa Rica. It was his pet project, his legacy play. The investors were skittish, though. They were old money types who valued discretion and stability above all else. A scandal, especially a messy personal one involving embezzlement and fraud, could spook them and sink the entire deal. I smiled for the first time in weeks. I had my target. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place thanks to Carol's own stupidity. She'd been stashing the cash she withdrew in a safe deposit box at a bank downtown, but she'd also, arrogantly, started wearing the jewelry Stephen bought her. One piece was a diamond tennis bracelet, ridiculously extravagant. I mentioned it, playing dumb. "That's new. It's shiny." She flushed. "It's cubic zirconia. A cheap knockoff. I like the style." I knew it wasn't. Frank had photos of the receipt. But her lie gave me the final thread I needed to pull. The month of cooling off was almost up. I knew the papers were drafted and ready to be served. It was time to make my move. I invited Carol over to the house for a talk. I told her I was ready to accept her terms, that I just wanted this to be over. I set the stage perfectly. I dressed down, looked tired and defeated. I ordered her favorite Thai food. She arrived, looking triumphant, and already mentally moved out. She barely touched the food. "So," she said, getting down to business, "you've seen the light." "I have," I said, my voice soft. "I can't fight you, Carol. And I can't fight Stephen's money. But before I sign anything, I need to understand. Why? Was I really that bad?" It was a gambit. I was appealing to her vanity, her need to have the last word, to justify her cruelty. She took the bait. She launched into a rehearsed monologue about her loneliness, my inadequacies, her stifled dreams. It was all the same stuff from her emails. I listened, nodding sadly, all the while with my phone in my pocket, its voice recorder app silently capturing every word. Then I guided her. And Stephen, he can give you all this? The life you talk about? Her eyes glittered with avarice. Oh, Mark, you have no idea. The Costa Rica deal alone will set us up for life. That's real money. Not this. She waved her hand dismissively at our beautifully appointed home. This middle-class dream you're so proud of. Costa Rica? I asked innocently. She couldn't help herself. Bragging was in her DNA. She detailed the project, how important it was, how the investors were lining up. Once the deal closes next week, it's going to be a whole new world. And thanks to your generosity in the divorce, she added with a vicious smile, I'll have my own little nest egg to contribute. The money you've been taking from the account? I asked, my voice still gentle. She froze for a fraction of a second, then recovered. That's for my personal expenses. My lawyer advised it. And the bracelet? I pressed. The cubic zirconia one? Stephen's lawyer advised that too? Buying you expensive jewelry with his money while you're still married to me? While you're hiding cash from our joint assets? That's not going to look great to a judge, Carol. Or to Stephen's investors in Costa Rica, if they were to find out. The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? The performance was over. I dropped the act. I sat up straight, and the defeated look vanished from my eyes, replaced by a cold, hard stare. I'm talking about the 45, zero in cash you've withdrawn and hidden in a safe deposit box at First Mercantile, box number 734. I'm talking about the diamond bracelet you're wearing right now, purchased by Stephen Thorne for $28,500 6 weeks ago. I'm talking about the emails where you and your boyfriend conspire to hide assets and deliberately inflict financial ruin on me. I'm talking about your little diary where you're fabricating evidence of emotional abuse. Her mouth was hanging open. She looked like a fish, gasping for air. You, how dare you spy on me? You did it in my house, Carol, I roared, finally letting the anger out. It wasn't a hot anger anymore. It was a cold, sharp instrument. You brought him into my home. You drank my scotch on my couch. You don't get to talk about daring. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. Then I pulled a thick manila envelope from my briefcase and slid it across the table. It was filled with copies of everything. The emails, the photos, the bank statements, the receipt for the bracelet. What is this? She whispered, her voice trembling. That's a copy. The original is with my lawyer, Rhonda Vance. You might have heard of her. They call her the Vacuum. And she is very excited to meet you. The name clearly registered. Carol's bravado completely collapsed. Panic set in. Mark, please, you don't understand. Stephen, he pushed me to do this. I'm sure he did. And I'm going to enjoy watching him squirm too. What do you want? She asked, her voice desperate. I want you to listen very carefully, I said, my voice calm and steady. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to call your lawyer and tell him you've had a change of heart. You are going to say you want an immediate, uncontested divorce. You will walk away with nothing but your clothes, your personal effects, and the cheap knockoff jewelry you're wearing. You will sign a full confession regarding the hidden cash and your plan to defraud me. And you will relinquish any and all claim to the house, my retirement, our investments, everything. You get nothing. That's insane. I'll never agree to that, she shrieked. You will, I said calmly. Because if you don't, I will not only give all of this to my lawyer, I will send a beautifully compiled package to every single investor in Thorne Capital's Costa Rica fund. I'll send it to the Wall Street Journal, too. I wonder how a headline like "Venture Capitalist Implicated in Divorce Fraud Scheme" will play with people who value discretion. How fast do you think that house in the Hamptons will vanish when Stephen's 9-figure deal goes up in smoke? She was crying now, real tears of terror and loss. Not for me, not for our marriage, but for the future that was slipping through her fingers. He'll leave me. If I ruin his deal, he'll drop me. That, I said, standing up, is the most intelligent thing you've said all night. Your value to him is directly tied to how easy and cheap you make this for him. If you become expensive and messy, you become worthless. So you have a choice, Carol. You can have nothing, and he might take you in out of pity, or you can have nothing and be completely alone. Those are your options. It's a divorce. You're just deciding who gets ruined, me or you and him together. I left her there, sobbing at the dining room table, surrounded by the evidence of her own downfall. The human capacity for self-preservation is a powerful thing. The next day, her lawyer called Rhonda Vance. He was flustered and confused. His client was insisting on an immediate, no-fault, uncontested divorce, waiving all claims to any marital assets. Rhonda, playing her part perfectly, pushed back. "My client is entitled to," she began, but Carol's lawyer interrupted, almost begging. No, my client is adamant. She just wants out. As soon as possible." The papers were signed within the week. I stood in the lawyer's office, watching Carol sign away everything she'd ever wanted. She wouldn't look at me. She looked hollowed out, a shell of the avaricious woman she'd been. She was wearing the diamond bracelet. I guess Stephen had let her keep it, a consolation prize. As she finished signing, she finally looked up at me. There was no apology in her eyes, only a deep, bitter hatred. "I hope you're happy now," she spat. "I'm not happy, Carol," I said truthfully. "I'm just not ruined." She stormed out. I never saw her again. The revenge wasn't complete, though. Stephen Thorne needed to learn his lesson, too. A few days after the divorce was finalized, a plain, unmarked envelope was delivered to his office. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the signed divorce settlement, the one where Carol walked away with nothing. At the bottom, I had written a single line. "I hear the Costa Rica deal is beautiful this time of year. Enjoy it. You paid enough for it." He got the message. Loud and clear. He knew that I knew, and that the sword would remain dangling over his head indefinitely. One wrong move, one attempt to come after me or help Carol, and I would bring his whole world crashing down. I sold the house. Too many ghosts. I took the money from the sale and my untouched retirement fund, and I did something I should have done years ago. I started my own consulting firm. It was scary, starting over at 50, but it was a clean start, an honest one. A year later, the business was thriving. I was in a new penthouse apartment with a view of the city that was all my own. I was dating a smart, funny architect who had no idea what my net worth was and didn't care. She liked me for my bad puns and my love of old westerns. I was reading the business section one Sunday morning when I saw a small, buried article. Thorne Capital's Costa Rica deal had indeed gone through, but it had been plagued with delays and cost overruns. Rumor was a key investor had pulled out at the last minute, spooked by personnel issues, forcing Thorne to scramble and secure less favorable terms. He'd still made money, but it wasn't the legacy-defining home run he'd wanted. I allowed myself a small, thin smile. Then I folded the paper and tossed it in the recycling bin. Sometimes, revenge isn't about explosions and dramatic confrontations. It's not about violence or screaming matches. Sometimes, the sweetest, most satisfying revenge is simply living well. It's the quiet peace of a morning without drama. It's the comfort of a life built on your own terms, without a greedy hand in your pocket or a lie in your ear. I looked out at the skyline, sipping my coffee. The past was finally, truly, behind me. The future was mine, and it was calm, and it was peaceful, and it was paid for.